In today's episode of Locked On Oilers, no Jesse Puljujarvi on waivers yet, but why does he become more valuable in a trade when he hits waivers? We will talk about that much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. I am your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, we're going to start off with a little Jesse Puljujarvi talk, as many people expected Puljujarvi to be on waivers today. However, that was not the case. But why does Puljujarvi become a more valuable trade piece if he does hit waivers? We will talk about that in just a second. But also on today's episode, we're going to preview the matinee weekend for the Oilers on Super Bowl weekend. Two weird matinees for the Oilers on Saturday and Sunday. We will preview those two games, and we will wrap up with the good, the bad, and the ugly from the game last night against the Philadelphia Flyers. An unfortunate 2-1 shootout loss for the Oilers in Philly. We shall see the Oilers can bounce back in the nation's capital on Saturday. Either way, all that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And where we're going to get started is with Jesse Puljujarvi. As once the clock struck noon today, everyone expected when the waiver news came by that Jesse Puljujarvi would be on waivers, because the expectation was that Kailer Yamamoto would be activated off LTIR and ready to play for the Edmonton Oilers on Sunday when they face off against the Montreal Canadiens 10:30 at the Bell Center. But that is not the case, however, as the Edmonton Oilers did not place Jesse Puljujarvi on waivers, and the expectation is now Kailer Yamamoto will probably be back for the Edmonton Oilers on Wednesday when they face off against the Detroit Red Wings, which will be a very good one after last time those two teams played. But there's a lot of lore around why Puljujarvi should and will be on waivers by next week. We kept putting up the Puljujarvi jersey going, this is the last week of Puljujarvi as an Oiler. Right now, that is not the case. It seems like we've bought ourselves about 5 more days, but we shall see. Now, Jesse Puljujarvi, so far this year, 49 games played, 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points, hasn't been fantastic. He's had up and down trade interest this season, it seems like, but it's gotten to the point where, especially now with the Oilers' injuries, that the Oilers, it's come to a head. And the Oilers need to get Puljujarvi off their books before Kailer Yamamoto steps back onto the ice. A trade is very difficult to make sometimes. And now you see the regression of that eventually ends up to when will Puljujarvi be on waivers. However, this may not be the worst thing for the Oilers right now. Why? Well, a couple of things. The first thing is once Jesse Puljujarvi clears waivers, because nobody really, if you take a look around the league, there aren't a lot of teams that are cap compliant enough to pick up a $3 million contract off of waivers and go, oh, look what we just got. But B, there's a lot of teams that have already been looking at Jesse Puljujarvi for one reason or another. They already know whether or not they want Puljujarvi, so trying to get him on waivers and trying to again become cap compliant isn't going to be very easy in a span of 24 hours or however long you have to make your waiver claim. However, what does make Jesse Puljujarvi, or once Jesse Puljujarvi does clear waivers, he then can go up and down between the AHL and the NHL without having to clear waivers again. So whoever ends up acquiring Jesse Puljujarvi does not have to place Puljujarvi back on waivers, risking him being picked up by another team. That's the first thing. The second thing is that once Puljujarvi is placed in the AHL by a team, his cap is then able to be buried in the AHL with a 1.125 cap hit. You can't put all $3 million down in the AHL and just go, we're good. There's a cap limit where you can have relief on a player, and that is 1.125 right now this year, or $1.125 million. And that's about a quarter. I'm not great with math, but just under half, really, of Jesse Puljujarvi's contract. So that really helps. But it doesn't help the Oilers, because they still need to clear about $3 million to bring Kyler Yamamoto back into the lineup. So there are the positives of putting him on waivers. He then gets to go up and down between the AHL and NHL. You are able to bury almost half of his contract in the AHL for the year as well. You don't have to wonder whether or not to risk basically the player getting picked up off waivers. The only kind of tough thing is that Jesse Puljujarvi is still an RFA at the end of the year. So if you're committing to Puljujarvi in a trade, you're going to have to commit to probably an extra year, depending on his qualifying offer, everything like that. He doesn't become a UFA until the end of next year. But we shall see what the Oilers end up doing. Honestly, again, only time will tell with what happens with Jesse Puljujarvi. Alrighty, let's move on to the weekend, as it sounds like one of the two games this weekend, Jesse Puljujarvi may suit up in. Maybe a little bit of a show 'em what you got game for Jesse Puljujarvi. But either way, the Edmonton Oilers are in the nation's capital and in Quebec. I don't know why I almost said France. My soccer roots are coming out. But either way, the Edmonton Oilers are back in Eastern Canada as they go through a very odd matinee weekend on Super Bowl weekend. We will preview those two matchups in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We are really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that is even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on anything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. Now, it is Super Bowl weekend. We talked a lot about the Super Bowl. So finally, I said a lot of the prop bets. We always like looking at the prop bets, but it's time. Who will win the Super Bowl? Will it be Jalen Hurts' Philadelphia Eagles or Patrick Mahomes he's won a Super Bowl, but getting his second Super Bowl, finally getting that second Super Bowl, because everybody wanted him to win last year. For me, I kind of want the Eagles. I'm taking a look at the Eagles, and the line right now favors them. They are the favorites at -122 on the money line. However, I am looking at the total. Again, total point spread for this game, 50.5 points. The over is currently at -115. 50.5, that's just 26-25. I'd say pretty attainable. Either way, FanDuel Sportsbook app, the entire app, it is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And best of all, you can get your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Alrighty, let's move on to the weekend for the Oilers, as the Oilers have two games this weekend. A 10:30 a.m. matinee for the Oilers in the nation's capital against the Ottawa Senators, and a 10:30 matinee against the Montreal Canadiens in Montreal on Super Bowl Sunday. What a weird set of games for the Oilers, especially coming off of a 5 p.m. game in Philadelphia and a 5:30 in Detroit. So, especially here in Edmonton, a little bit weird, but either way, let's start off with the game on Saturday between the Oilers and the Senators, as the Oilers are going up against an interesting team in Ottawa, as the Senators are 24-23-3 so far this year. Now, they've had up and down years so far, but especially going into this trade deadline, it sounds like the Senators may be open to kind of buying. They aren't really in a playoff race. They are still kind of, but the key word is kind of in all of this. The Ottawa Senators are kind of stuck in the middle of pushing for the playoffs. They're kind of not necessarily in the lottery talk, but not necessarily not in the lottery talk. They've had a little bit of, again, you can kind of see that in their record with the 24-23-3. Now, it sounds like they may be buyers of sort at the deadline, just kind of experimenting with what they are successful at, so then they can kind of build for the future. I kind of like the way they're thinking. But either way, we talked about the Ottawa Senators last week, or earlier this week, I should say, and talked about Cam Talbot potentially playing for the Ottawa Senators. However, as of today, Cam Talbot has been placed on the injury reserve, and he will not play against the Edmonton Oilers with a lower body injury. Now, we shall see who does get the start for the Senators in this one, but either way, a couple of things for the Oilers to look out for the Ottawa Senators. Obviously, they're three big point getters in Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, and Claude Giroux, a guy I thought the Oilers were going to take a stab at until they did get their guy back in Evander Kane. But Brady Tkachuk this year, the leading scorer on the Senators, 50 games played, 20 goals, 31 assists, good for 51 points. Stützle, 46 games played, 22 goals, 27 assists, and 49 points on the year. Now, I found out this summer, that Tim Stützle, when he was on vacation, he was actually vacationing in the same city or the same place that Leon Draisaitl was vacationing, and they too, Stützle obviously being German as well, he kind of picked his brain, Draisaitl's brain, just learning more about the game and learning more about playing in the NHL. So I'm really excited to see how Stützle turns out as a pro. Has had a lot of very good influences around him, so we shall see. But and of course, Claude Giroux, speaking of influences, 50 games played so far this year, 20 goals, 28 assists, good for 48 points. Now, the Ottawa Senators so far this year, pretty shocking when it comes to 5-on-5 play, but not so much when it comes to the special teams. We'll talk about the 5-on-5 in a second, but the special teams has been a strength for the Ottawa Senators, so much so that they had the second best power play in the NHL this year at an even 27%, and their penalty kill is not far behind, 13th in the NHL, in the upper echelon or upper half of the NHL's penalty kill with an 80.6. However, when it comes to the 5-on-5 game, the Senators are one of the worst in the league. Goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. The Ottawa Senators sit 30th with a 2.07, and goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, they sit 25th with 2.81. The Oilers, over the last 11 games, goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 is first with a 4.11, and goals against per 60 minutes at eighth with 2.17. So a little bit of a telling story, I think, for these two teams. Then on the other side too, the Edmonton Oilers have had one of the best penalty kills over the last 10 games in the NHL. So we shall see if the Edmonton Oilers are able to take advantage of the Ottawa Senators at 5-on-5. The Oilers have been one of the best teams scoring at 5-on-5 as well, and preventing, obviously, goals from going in at 5-on-5 as well. So maybe where the Oilers win this game. But when it comes to Montreal, who the Oilers play on Sunday, again, another 10:30 puck drop, maybe a little bit more cut and dry in this one. As Ottawa, you don't know what you're going to get out of them, but the Montreal Canadiens, you kind of know what you're going to get from them. A little bit of the Coilers, the spoilers type feel with the Canadiens this year. 27-4 on the season for the Montreal Canadiens, and here's their injured reserve list. Cole Caulfield, Caden Gooley, Uri Slavkovsky, Brendan Gallagher, Jonathan Drouin, Jake Evans, who just signed a contract extension today, and Sean Monahan. Now, Caden Gooley has been skating recently, but that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players. Very good players, might I add, who are on the IR for the Montreal Canadiens now. And that also includes Cole Caulfield, who is second on the team in scoring, 46 goals, 26 assists, 46 games played, not 46 goals, 46 games played, 26 goals, 10 assists, 36 points for Caulfield, but again, had to have shoulder surgery. And it sounds like Kirby Dach, I've heard some rumblings around Kirby Dach potentially not being 100% healthy as well. He is third on the Habs in points with 33 points, 11 goals, 22 assists. Now, I was listening to Georges Laraque on Oilers Now today, and it sounds like a lot of love for Kirby Dach in Montreal. A lot of talk about Dach being the number one center over Nick Suzuki. So a lot of love for Dach so far this year. But again, could he be playing injured? Hopefully not, because the grand scheme of things, it's not really worth it. But those are two of their three top scorers potentially injured as well in Dach and Caulfield. Nick Suzuki, of course, leading the team in points with 40 points so far this year through 51 games. Now, we talked about the power play, the penalty kill, and 5-on-5 play for the Ottawa Senators being kind of night and day for them. However, for the Montreal Canadiens, it's basically exactly how you expect it to go. 31st on the power play with a measly 15.6%, and 30th on the penalty kill with 72.8%. And then their goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 this year, 1.75, which puts them in 31st. And goals against per 60 minutes, 13th in the league, which actually isn't that bad, at 2.38. However, it is the scoring that is hindering the Montreal Canadiens, and when you have guys like Caulfield, Slavkovsky, Gallagher, Drouin, Monahan out, that makes sense. Either way, both of those games go at 10:30 in the morning. What is going on? Saturday and Sunday, Super Bowl weekend. Weird Super Bowl weekend timing, but either way, at least you get to watch the Super Bowl. Let's wrap up today's episode with a little bit of good, bad, and ugly from last night's game against the Philadelphia Flyers. We will talk about that in just a second. Alrighty, let's wrap up with a little bit of good, the bad, and the ugly from the game between the Edmonton Oilers and the Philadelphia Flyers in Philly. A 2-1 shootout loss for the Oilers, but they are able to extend their 10-game point streak, 8-0-2. Over the last 10 games, look to improve on that record in the nation's capital, but we're not talking about the future. We're talking about the past, and that is last night, where, again, the Oilers lost 2-1. Let's start off with the good from that game, and the good was Stuart Skinner. 35 saves on 36 shots fired towards him. Kept the Oilers in the game, and really, it was his offense that let him down, which we will talk about in a second. But after giving up the first goal, Stuart Skinner went on an absolute heater. 32 straight saves again, keeping the Oilers in this game. In a game where the Oilers just kind of left Skinner out to dry. It was tough to watch, really, but either way, Stuart Skinner, the good in this one. The bad, already mentioned, the offense, as Evander Kane, the only one able to get one through, caught a hat in this one. Zach Hyman thought he was able to get the game-winning goal late in the third. Unable, well, it was called back, of course, because it's Zach Hyman, but that is not a game where the Oilers would have won anytime. There was no secondary scoring. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl didn't get on the board. McDavid did get an assist on the Evander Kane goal, but other than that, not too much from them. A lot of people giving a lot of criticism to Leon Draisaitl. I don't think he should be immune to criticism, obviously, but sometimes it is a little harsh. I do think, obviously, he has been in a slump. There's no getting around that, but tough game for him in where were they last night? Philadelphia. Almost said Pittsburgh. Tough game for him in Philadelphia last night. Hopefully he can bounce back over the weekend, but the offense was the bad in this one. Now you must be thinking, if that's the bad, what's the ugly? Well, the ugly was the lack of intensity from the Edmonton Oilers. We mentioned in the episode yesterday that they're going into Philadelphia, the Broad Street Bullies. You're going up in the city of brotherly love. This is a tough team to play against, and you played kind of in the Philadelphia Flyers' hands. One of the keys to victory was get nasty with this team, and they didn't. They let the Flyers play their game, and the Oilers played into the Flyers' hands, took them super, super easy, and we saw one of the flattest games from the Oilers in quite a while. So kind of a sad state of affairs for the Oilers in that one, and that is chalked up to the lack of intensity from a lot of the Oilers. So to wrap up the good, the bad, and the ugly from last night's game between the Edmonton Oilers and the Philadelphia Flyers, the good being Stuart Skinner, 35 saves on 36 shots and 32 straight after allowing the first goal of the game. The bad, the offense, as Evander Kane, the only one able to get one through Kata Hot. Although it is his third goal in his third straight game, that is great to see. But other than that, there is nothing really else going. And the ugly from last night, of course, the lack of intensity, allowing the first goal of the game. Tons of turnovers as well from the Edmonton Oilers. Very lackadaisical, and that was the downfall of the Oilers. Either way, the Oilers look to improve on last night's game and look to improve to 9-0-2 in the last 11 games and keep their 11-game point streak alive as the Oilers face off against the Ottawa Senators tomorrow for 10:30 puck drop. Yes, 10:30 in the morning. In the nation's capital. We shall see you after the two games on Super Bowl weekend, and hopefully on Monday we can all play La Bamba, baby.